Shut up.
Self-reliant individuals. The Constitution supports that idea, and what we're going to talk about in Article 4 really kind of explains it. But before I get too much into that, how the Constitution really pushes the idea of individualism is by pushing the idea of the individuality of the states. State sovereignty is what the Constitution is all about, to promote it and to protect it. The federal government was to be created but limited so that it did not interfere with state sovereignty. It was created for the common defense of what? Those sovereign states. It was created for a more perfect union of what? Those sovereign states. It's all about the sovereign states, these autonomous states that are not provinces or counties like in other countries where they are just zones under the realm of the king or the dictator or whoever else is in charge, but autonomous, self-governing entities, little republics that have joined in a union because individually they could not survive. They needed to join together. But otherwise, they are sovereign, separate individuals, just like we are supposed to be. And a matter of fact, you may come across things about the sovereign citizen. We are, as citizens, sovereign. We're supposed to be. As the states are supposed to be. When the sovereignty of the states began to be dickered with, I have too much fun sometimes. That's when our downhill scramble really started to begin. So, I asked that question about manifest destiny earlier. The reason why I asked that, because I was curious what the response would be. Manifest destiny was that we were driving from one coast to the other. We were always growing. We always had a goal as a nation of growth and more. And then when we got to the West Coast, we didn't stop there. We continued on with territories and so on and so forth to grow. But the problem is, as that was happening, in the late 1800s, a progressive movement started to bubble up. And for now over 100 years, we have been battling a system that is determined to stop individuality. It's all about the collective. Individualism is what created this country. Individualism is what made this nation prosper. And individualism is what was behind the writing of this. Now, thinking about the states and how they are sovereign, that means that the federal government can't impose anything on the states. They're not supposed to anyway. It's the reason why the states used to be the voice of the Senate, too.
Yeah, but the states let them, though.
The states let them.
They accept their federal bribery and extortion money.
Well, they prefer to call it.
Well, the states are extorted. Do this and do that, or you don't get your highway funds. And I'm still waiting for a state to make federal income tax withholding illegal and say, fine, we'll keep the money for ourselves.
Thank you. Build our own highways.
I swear, if I was governor.
Maybe you should run.
Yeah, I've got a lot of people trying to convince me to run for city council
Yeah,
again next year. And
who knows the Constitution should run.
Right, yeah,
It's
that's
a
the problem. A lot of them
it's a
don't.
step. Yeah. All right, Article 4, Section 3, on page 14. It's about 2/3 of the way down the page. Page 14, about 2/3 of the way down the page, Article 4, Section 3, begins this way. New states may be admitted by the Congress in this union, but no new state shall be formed or erected within the jurisdiction of any other state, nor any state be formed by the junction of two or more states or parts of states without the consent of the legislatures of the states concerned as well as of the Congress. In other words, new states can be made, but the federal government can't just make them. The states involved still have a say. Why? Because they're sovereign entities. They rule their area just as much as anybody else. Remember when, and we were talking about this a little bit last Thursday, remember when Jeff Stone suggested that, 13 counties in California should, split from the rest of California?
I think we should.
Yes.
And I said, hey, I wouldn't be totally against the idea, but it'll never happen. Why?
Why would Sacramento want to let that happen?
Because they
Because
wouldn't
that's
have
where all
the
the money
tax
is.
money to
They don't want to
spend.
lose our money.
Yeah, that's where all the money is. The more conservative
Comes down to
counties, that's where all the money is. See,
Oh, yeah.
see, here's the thing about socialism, communism, and all that,
There's no money.
is it needs capitalism.
Thank you.
The state had to already have a government set up before they could split.
Read that paragraph, starting
Yeah,
at number 3, be
yeah.
approved by the legislature. If you're going to admit a state, you're saying that state needs a legislature before it's admitted. How else can you have?
I
a
see that from a legal point of view, what you're saying.
Okay,
I
that's
don't
not
know if
how
that
that
was,
what
I
that
don't
says,
think
but
that
to
was,
me.
I get
Okay.
what you're saying. I think it's gonna be existing states that are
Consent of
consent of
legislature.
existing states. I wouldn't go so far as
Read
that.
the sentence again.
I know what you're
No,
saying.
but
I know,
yeah, I know what you're saying too, but that would be if two states wanted to become one. they'd
Well,
have
you know
to-
what,
the legislature
hang on a
would
second.
agree.
Hang on a second. Consent of the legislatures of the states concerned. Since that is not a state yet, it's not a state concerned.
Yeah, that's,
Now, if we were, now let's say to create a state, just for fun of argument, where Four Corners is, and you got, 4 states, and they decide they want to have one state right there, those 4 states, all of their legislatures would have to consent to giving up that land and forming that state, but the new state wouldn't have to consent because they're not a state yet.
yeah.
All states concerned, but it's not a state. How can they have a legislature and a say if it's not even a state yet?
Good point.
How is it going to be a sovereign unit if it's not a sovereign unit?
It will.
It has to
Create that
become.
once it's given that.
They have
No,
to create
It's
a
a
new
What you're
government.
saying is that the federal government creates the sovereign,
Not at all. We're talking boundaries here.
Consent.
We're talking boundaries. Now, whether or not there is a legislature type system already set up in the new area or not, I'm not saying there wouldn't be, but I'm saying that they're not gonna need to give their consent because they're not a state yet. And that's asking for the consent of states that are concerned. And they're not a state yet, so they're not a concerned state. It's gonna be existing states. I mean, I get what you're trying, the legal mind is a scary thing. I get what you're saying from the, because when you try to break down the words of language, it comes across like that, but if you really think about it, you want the consent of the legislatures of the concerned states. They're not a concerned state, because they're not a state.
Because the concerned states
Because
are
at
gonna
this
lose
point,
the
because
land.
at this point,
then you're saying the federal government has the power to create a state.
the Congress
California.
is a part of that. How does it begin?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
California would be able to discuss it, and the.
New states
the
may be
Congress.
admitted by the Congress into this union, but new states shall be formed or erected within the jurisdiction of any other state, nor any state, in other words,
New states may be admitted. They were a state, they were a sovereign political entity before they were admitted.
now the primary concern here had to do with territories that are wanting statehood. That's what the primary concern was. We're talking about situations like what Jeff Stone wanted. But nonetheless, concerned state is California. The new entity isn't formed yet. There may be a drive for having a legislature, but it's not a state yet, so it's not a concern.
I would have an issue with that.
All right.
Because it would impart to the federal government the ability to create a state. And I'm saying the sovereign nature of the state pre-exists them being in the union.
Right, but they're not technically a state yet, so their consent is not a part of the admission.
They're not a state, a quote-unquote state.
I mean, their consent is obviously there if they want to become a state. They're driving, asking to become a state. It's not a matter of the legislature. What we're talking about is any existing states that exist given consent. This area wants to become a state. There's a bunch of people in the state, or in this area wants to become a state. They have organized. All the states involved, you know, maybe a part of that land maybe is also one county from Arizona. Arizona would have to consent. So I'm saying all parties involved have to consent to it. Otherwise, those people don't do what they
That's
want.
clearly in section 3.
Yeah.
But the aspect of the existence of the state, I dispute the fact that the federal government's got the power to create a state.
I mean, I get what you're trying to say, but I don't think that that's.
Alternatively, I was watching something on the History Channel just a while ago relative to.
Okay, let's reread this paragraph. The Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States. And now, listen very carefully to the language, and I know you're going to have fun with this language. And nothing in this Constitution shall be construed as to prejudice any claims of the United States or of any particular state.
What does that mean?
Well, first off, I'd like to know what property is.
What property
On
is?
DC.
Congress shall have power to
Other
dispose of-
property belonging to the United States, what's
Oh, DC.
included in that? Anything other than DC though? Is that just?
Well, here it's
That's general.
here it's referring to
Possessions.
geographic property, but I get where you're getting at. When I was in the United States military,
This is for a
United
border
States.
invasion.
United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government. If these are not individual sovereign entities, why would they need a republican government?
What does that mean?
These are individual states. In other words, a representative system under the rule of law, using democratic processes. Our state systems are very similar to the national system, right?
Yeah.
We have an executive, governor. We have two houses of legislature,
And an
right?
assembly.
And we have a state judiciary. And the state governments are model, well, one could say that the federal government's modeled after the states, but really because the states were more democratic prior, to be honest with you, and in some cases theocratic. But anyway, and shall protect each of them against invasion.
That's a joke.
That's a big joke.
Yeah, nowhere in here does say shall protect each of them against invasion unless the people really want to be here, then that's okay. Yeah, amnesty. And on application of the legislature, what does that mean?
The state legislature.
State legislature asking or wanting something? Or of the executive, when the legislature cannot be convened. Who's the executive at the state level? The governor. So in other words, what this opening qualifier here is, legislature has to ask for whatever we're getting ready to say, and if they can't, then the governor can't. The governor can't if the legislature can't. Legislature first. Against domestic violence.
Why does it?
Now here's what that means. If there's domestic violence, let's say rioting in Watts, just
You were
Just
there,
an
buddy.
example.
federal government can't just come in with the jackboots and take care of it. The legislature has to okay it. All right, how about that search for the Boston bomber?
That was
Could
illegal.
those federal agents be there without the state
No, they couldn't.
allowing it?
No.
No.
But yet they were.
How about the hurricane in New Orleans?
Katrina.
Okay, great example. Now,
It's all
They
Bush's
were
fault. Bush can't come in,
right.
but it's all his fault.
14.
yeah, what he's referring to is the argument that FEMA and the federal government didn't react fast enough after Katrina. Well,
The
Governor Blanco
The governor
refused
Yeah.
refused to declare a state of
He just probably
emergency.
told her.
And so in other words, she refused to give the federal government the allowance to come in, and the federal government can't come in to the state without being asked to.
Right.
Well, shame on.
Well, I should say Blanco and her legislature refused.
Shame on the counterpart to,
Now, hang on a second, Joe, because I want to get to a point here. I wrote a piece on this about a week and a half ago about some tweaking they've done in the Pentagon that allows for federal military troops to be used in cases of civil disturbances
is that
They
the
rewrote-
without state okay.
Oh, brother.
It's like the executive
Unconstitutional.
order.
It's totally unconstitutional.
Everything is.
Is
It
that-
goes
an
completely
executive
against what
order?
we just read.
Is that part of that executive order that in the four out?
Yeah.
No, well, it's related to that, but this was actually something the Pentagon did separately from that.
Well, they can't legislate.
I wouldn't be surprised if, in the process of giving the graft/grant money to the states, that they made them sign a waiver to allow them to do that. But I wanted to make a
Or else you don't get your highway funds.
That's right. I wanted to make a remark about immigration because everybody's, every time when we talk about immigration, everybody thinks Hispanics. And a Hispanic friend of mine posted a thing today, and he said everybody thinks immigration's strictly a Mexican problem.
No,
That is not true.
it's not.
Not at all.
In fact, I personally, for a lot of reasons, am pro-amnesty. Okay,
Muzzies.
but my brother works for a large company that does door-to-door sales in San Diego. He said that, and we grew up in San Diego, he said that he has walked El Cajon, and it's Chaldeans. And so the Chaldeans are all the people that got uprooted from, I guess that group of people all came from Iraq. And we talk about immigration, most people think it's strictly a Hispanic issue.
No.
I remember when I was a little kid, the Vietnamese people that came over and lived next door to my friend, and we were all upset because they all got $10,000 when they came over here.
Oh,
and
they all
were
got a
buying
car. They
houses.
gave them a new car.
And it's just been one war after another. I'm sure we do that for everybody's that we
I
go
read
in
a
and blow their
study a few
countries up.
years ago. And I believe I linked to it on my site. You might be able to find it. But I read a study a few years ago that was done down there at the San Isidro border crossing, that 1 out of every 3 illegal alien crossing the border crossing there at San Isidro was of Middle Eastern
Oh, I
descent.
know.
How do they know?
1 out of 3.
How do they know that?
They track it.
Well, they know when people are crossing the border. One of the things that they do,
But
and he can attest to this, one of the things they do, you ever seen at a baseball field, in between innings, they track where it went, and
Okay.
then they know how many people are crossing for the most part.
Well, how-
And as for,
The Mexicans
who's Middle Eastern descent, who's Mexican descent, let's refer back to Susan's comment about the mad cow disease. If we can find, we know. I think we
And I
know
always
more
want to say
than
one more
even-
thing regarding illegal immigration. And because everybody in here, for the most part, it seems to me, is at least is a Christian, okay? So when you go back and you look at the Tower of Babel, what is the lesson you learn from that? We are not going to ever assimilate people into this country until we're all speaking the same language. We need to stop printing. I'm for amnesty now, but as part of the amnesty, I don't only want a fence, I only want to pay for everything written in English. And it's not because I don't like other people, it's because we're not going to assimilate and become a country. And if one country, I mean, the lesson is clear, the Tower of Babel. How much clearer does it need to be?
Can I say
And
something?
Obama, in a
Did
speech
you-
recently, let loose the reason why he supports the illegal immigration invasion. It's because, like La Raza and the Aztlan group,
Aztlan, yeah.
Aztlan, it's A-T-Z-L-A-N, he believes that this is stolen land and it belongs to Mexico.
Oh,
The
Obama
goal-
believes
The goal is not for them to assimilate, it's for them to
Hey,
retake it.
Can I say
That's
something,
garbage.
please?
But we
Can I say
beat them. There was a war. We won. It's
And then
ours.
and then we still paid for the land too.
Can I
Yeah.
say something, please?
Go ahead.
We're stupid.
I am against any form of amnesty, and I'll tell you why. My dad, and Mom are divorced. My dad brought a Filipino lady over here, really neat lady, we love her to death, they're married, but he paid his hundreds and thousands of dollars, did all the paperwork. She came here, she got her green card, and eventually now she's a citizen. Now, why should they have to do it the right way, and these other people
Well,
can
because,
just be here?
I'll tell you why, because when they came across, Americans were still having babies And we didn't need them to pay the Social Security, so all the old
Yeah, so
people
in other
collecting
words,
Social
so,
Security now can get their checks.
Let me clarify.
You know, 50
something.
million plus
Let me
abortions in the
clarify.
United States.
You don't support amnesty because you think it's a good idea from a point of view of the legals, but from the point of view of just pure numbers.
Well, we're never going to deport them. If you think you're going to deport 50 million people and their kids,
Why not?
it's not going to happen.
Let me give you a response and then we'll
It's
wrap
not
it.
gonna happen.
Hang on.
If we have amnesty, it's still not gonna
And
happen.
another thing is it's not a federal problem, it's a state problem.
Joe?
That's another thing.
Let me give you a response and then we'll wrap it
Call
up
it.
with that.
Calling it.
Europe used that same argument because they needed the workers and the numbers, and now they're overrun with Islam.
Yeah.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yep.
Thank you to Faith Armory,
Slap in
faitharmory.com
the face to people
for
that
allowing us to
came
use
here
this classroom. You
illegally.
can read what I write at
Why should my dad have had to do it the
thepoliticalpistachio.com.
right way? And
Listen to my
everybody else
radio
can just
program
break the
on
laws
Saturdays at
That's
2
what
on
irritates me.
KCAA Radio, kcaaradio.com. And thanks to my three sponsors, FST Santa Gravel, FSTSand.com.
Do you get what I'm saying? These people broke the law.
ConstitutionQuest.com, the game that you can play to learn the Constitution, and ProtectiveBunkers.com.
Yeah.
Next Thursday we talk about Article 5.
Yeah.
Boy, oh boy.
I have something.